Hey kids, it's me. Today I am modeling Morphomon from Digimon, which I thought I'd already done, but I can't find it, so I'm just going to start from scratch in Blockbench. I'm going to record some of it so you guys can watch, mostly while I do the head. If it gets boring, I'll just edit those pieces out, but hopefully this gives you an idea of how to shape kind of balls with cheeks and whatever else Morphomon's head looks like. I won't be showing a picture of it on screen because that seems like a lot of work and I don't know how to do that. But you are welcome to pull up a picture of it and take a look. I'll be going off the official art that you can find on Wikimon, and I will link it down in the description below. So to start out with, Morphomon is a pretty round organic shape. So I'll start out with a sphere. I know I've made a video on making spheres before. That was in Tabula. Blockbench is a little different, not by much. So to make it, you will start out with your bone for your head. You're going to add a cube. When I'm doing spheres that aren't attached to larger models, so when the sphere is kind of the starting point, I make my cubes 3 by 3 just because it doesn't make it too big, but it gives you enough room to work with when you're texturing and adding those smaller details. It's mostly a personal preference, but that's what I would suggest if you asked me how to start. So you've got your cube, it's 3 by 3, Control D will duplicate it, and you want the pivot point to be in the center, and then you're going to rotate it. I'm going to rotate it by 20 degrees. If you don't want as many blocks in your sphere, you can rotate it by less. By 30 degrees would be a good amount. Any number that 360 will divide by so that you can get a good circle. I wouldn't suggest doing any numbers smaller than 20, just because then you'll have a lot of blocks, but it won't be any noticeably smoother. You'll basically be making things really hard for yourself for not a lot of payoff. So 20 degrees, duplicate it again and rotate it another 20. Oh, nope. Which gets you to 40 degrees. And again. And now every time I press X, I'm switching to the vertex snap tool. By default, Blockbench should be doing that for you. If you change your key bindings and it doesn't, change it back. I can't help you with that. But we're just going to keep doing that. Now if you look at my toolbar up along the top, you'll notice I have a couple more buttons than the default Blockbench. These 3 here. If you go to the toolbar menu, you can customize it and add any functions that you might want to use that aren't up there by default. I added these 3, and I will show you why in a minute. So here we go. We've got half the circle right here. So now I'm going to select these blocks. Not like that. So control click, you can select multiple blocks. If you shift click, it will select everything from that block to the next block, so, or just everything on the bone. I prefer to control click. And the little corners are showing up because I'm still on the vertex snap tool. For selecting, it doesn't really matter. If the corners bother you, you can switch to the move tool and you can still select them all. So then Control D, you'll duplicate all of those and you'll see your model tree just got a lot longer. And then we are going to go to flip Z, and it's going to flip it along the Z axis, which is this one here. Because of where my initial block was placed, it made a perfect circle. If it hadn't done that, so if your bone was somewhere besides in the exact center of the model, and you flipped it, you see it's out of place. Easy way to fix that, use the vertex snap tool. Because they're all selected, they'll all come with you, and snap it to there. Just going to move that back to the center. So now I have a ring, and it's on my head bone. This probably isn't where I'll want the bone pivot to be, but I can fix that later. So now I'm going to take this whole head and I'm going to duplicate it. So now I have head and head 2. I don't want 2 head bones when I'm animating, so I'm just going to rename it to head base. This is my shorthand for it's a bone but don't use it. At the end I can get rid of that bone if I choose to do so. So now I'm going to take the whole bone and I'm going to rotate it, again by 20 degrees. Because I'm rotating everything by 20 degrees, it's going to make a perfect sphere. If I rotated these by 20 degrees and say the rings by 30, it wouldn't work because the ring would kind of close in. It wouldn't work. You pretty much have to rotate them all by the same amount if you are trying to make an even circle. Again, because my bone is in the exact center of the model, it lined up as soon as I rotated it. If it hadn't, so because the pivot is in the exact center, every time I rotate it, every time I rotate it, the blocks spin around the center, and you can see that perfect circle forming. $120. And alright. So 9 rings in total, 18 blocks around, and we've got this perfect sphere here. That being said, there is some overlap up here. If you want to, you can shorten every second block so that they don't clip together as much. Again, that's more of a personal preference. I do sometimes, often I don't, because it doesn't show up that much once it's textured, and I kind of like this geometric pattern as opposed to more widely overlapping squares. Anyway, personal preference. You will notice there are tiny little gaps here. That is because we don't have a block at exactly 90 degrees. If we had rotated all our blocks by 30, we'd have a block at exactly 90 degrees instead of one at 80 and one at 100, and those would sit exactly together. But because we don't, you will have this little gap. No real way to get rid of it unless you want to get really technical. Not something I would bother with. Again, it's a lot of work for not much payoff. So you've got your ball. Down here you can see your 16 by 16 reference grid. 16 by 16 is the size of a default Minecraft block, so this is how big a block would be. Doesn't matter too much because we can scale it once it gets into the mod, but if you're making it way too big or way too small, it will cause technical difficulties later on, so try and make it, bigger than a block, but not bigger than 20 blocks. If you have any questions, comments, concerns with that, let me know. We can usually find a way to work around it. So now we have got this. Now if you look at the picture of Morphomon, you will see that, well, its head is round. It's not a perfect circle because it's got those little cheeks down towards the bottom. And if you look at the official artwork, you'll see that, well, it does have the cheeks. They're sticking out more to the sides than they are to the front. It doesn't really have a muzzle so much as just the little cheeks. If you've played the mod at all recently, you'll know what Koromon looks like. This is going to be the same principle that I used for Koromon, but the cheeks aren't going to be quite as big because Koromon is quite squishy and Morphomon is less so. So you've got your head, you've got all your rings. If you want to get rid of these rings, right-click, resolve. Just gets rid of the folder but keeps all the cubes in the same place. So now the rotations are combined. I'm going to leave mine in folders in case I need to move them later, and also because that way I can hide them and my outline isn't quite as long and difficult to work with. So next up, we're going back to the front of our model. You might see that this looks different than this. That's just because of how the default shading works. Once you get to texturing it, it won't show, so don't worry about that. And we are going to add another group for the muzzle. F2 to rename. It would help if I could spell it. You don't really need a bone here because I don't plan on making its nose move, and once I get to the end I will resolve that back into the main head bone. But for now, in case I need to adjust it, I have it on a bone so I can just easily click and drag and move the whole thing. So I've got my muzzle, got it kind of where I want it, and I'm going to add a cube. That cube is purple, which is not a problem, but so that we can see what I'm doing, I'm going to delete it and try again, and I got a red cube. And this is just so you guys can more clearly see the difference between this purple sphere we made for the head and what we're doing now for the muzzle. Doesn't matter because it's going to go away as soon as you start to texture it. So that's, kind of right. So we're going to duplicate it and we're going to rotate it exactly the same as we did for the rings on the sphere. 50 might be a bit too much. You can rotate it however much you want. It doesn't have to be an even number. I like even numbers because they make me happy, but it doesn't matter. 30, 60. I'm thinking maybe I want this 2 blocks long. R quickly switches you to the rotate tool, X to the snap tool. And I'm just going to extend this slightly so that the bottom of the mouth matches up with the head. So we've got this muzzle. Kind of looks right from the side, but from the front it just looks like a beak. So now we are going to duplicate it, which gives us muzzle 2. I'm going to attach it to the original muzzle just so if I want to move it, I can grab it and the whole thing will go with me. I'm going to take this, move it to one side. Because they're all selected, S to resize, and I can just resize them all at once. R to rotate, which will rotate them all around the muzzle 2 pivot. X for the vertex snap, and I'm going to snap it to there. Now it wouldn't matter if I snapped this to the corresponding one on this or this to the corresponding corner on this, because they line up perfectly because they are completely vertical blocks. Down here, these two line up as well. No matter how many shapes you get, they're always basically cubes. So things that are rotated 0 degrees, 90 degrees, 180, or 360, or 270 will meet up better than things rotated any of these angles. That's just how it is. Not much you or I or anyone else can do about that. So then we're going to take it and we're going to rotate it by another 20, which will get us 40. I didn't mean to do that. And I'm going to snap this to there. Now, because these are rotated 30 degrees and these are rotated 20 degrees and they're all different sizes, you can already see it's not making a circle, it's making whatever shape this is. which is fine for my purposes, but if you're trying to make a sphere doing this, it wouldn't be working too well for you. Snap that whole piece to there. Now, because I don't want the cheeks coming back too much, I'm going to shorten this again. And you can see as I move them and snap them, the pivot kind of makes its way out of the middle of the piece. It doesn't matter for the end product because I'm going to be resolving all of these anyway. But if you rotate it, if you rotate a piece and suddenly you can't find it, it's probably because your pivot is not in the middle of the piece. Now what I'm doing here is I'm seeing if I can just extend this and have it blend in with the cheek. I can't. So I'm going to add one more. And get it out here where I can actually see it. And I'm going to snap it to there. It's still not quite meeting up there. But if I'll leave that till the end and then I'll decide what to do. Alright, so now you have a face and a little muzzle. It looks to me like this part is sticking out too much, so I'm just going to take this. You can move entire blocks by, you can see down here, by 1 unit any direction by clicking and dragging. Shift and click lets you move them by quarters of units. I like that better than moving it the whole block. This is more what I was aiming for. If you wanted to move it even less, control click lets you move it by by tenths of blocks, and then shift control click lets you move it pretty well freely. I think it's by 0.05 of a block. So now I am going to duplicate this part, and back up to these, I'm going to flip it along the x-axis, which puts it over there. Because the point it's flipping along is exactly in the middle of the modeling field, it's going to flip perfectly. If it didn't, X to get the pivot tool up and snap it to that. So now we have a little head, some little cheeks. I'm not sure I'm quite happy with where it is, so I'll keep moving it around a little bit. Because it's all in one bone, that's easy to do. There we go. So we've got those little cheeks, and we've got almost no bulge in the front, which is kind of what I was going for. I'm thinking I could even make this a little bit more subtle. It is very much a trial and error. I'm probably going to edit this part out because it's not going to be super interesting. Alright, so now we've got this. I might end up adjusting it again as I go. It's hard to tell when you haven't made the rest of the model yet. Also, the fact that this is red and this is purple makes the cheeks stand out more than they otherwise would. But right now I'm pretty happy with it. You can see the shape coming together there, and once I get the ears and the body and all of that on, it will look more like what I'm trying to make it look like. If you have any questions, let me know. If I don't know the answer, we'll try and figure it out. I hope this helped. Have a good day.